The sound of a crowbar smashing against solid oak is something you never forget, especially when the person swinging it is your own son. Open this door right now, you senile old thief. My daughter-in-law, Brittany, was screaming on the other side, her voice shrill enough to crack the windows. This is my house. Do you hear me? Mine? I sat in my leather armchair in the middle of the living room, completely still. On the small side table next to me sat a glass of bourbon, neat, and my old 12-gauge shotgun. I was not holding it. I was just cleaning it with a rag, and slowly and methodically. I had no intention of using it not on my own flesh and blood, but in Texas. A man has the right to defend his castle. And sometimes the mere sight of cold steel is enough to remind people of their manners. Bang, another hit. The wood frame splintered. I could hear Preston, my only son, grunting with exertion on the other side. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. 4:15 p.m. The police would be here in exactly 2 minutes. I had timed the call perfectly. If you are watching this, take a deep breath, because what I am about to tell you is the story of how I had to destroy my own son to save myself. My name is Harlon Ford. I am 70 years old, and until 48 hours ago, I thought I could enjoy a peaceful retirement in the home I built with my own hands. I was wrong. Before I tell you how the police handcuffed my son on his own front porch, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever had to draw a line in the sand with your own family. The heavy front door groaned and finally flew open with a sickening crack. Wood splinters showered onto the entryway rug. Preston stumbled into the room chest, heaving his face twisted in a rage I had never seen before. He was gripping a rusted crowbar in his right hand, his knuckles white. Behind him stood Brittany, holding her phone up the red light recording. There he is, everyone! She yelled at her phone screen, live streaming to her 3,000 followers. Look at this crazy old man. He changed the locks on us. He stole our house. We are the victims here. Preston took a step toward me, raising the crowbar. Get out, Dad. Get out right now, or I swear to God, I will smash every piece of furniture in this room until there is nothing left. This house is in my name. The deed says Preston Ford. You have no right to lock me out. I did not flinch. I did not stand up. I simply picked up the rag and wiped a speck of dust off the barrel of the shotgun lying on the table. The movement caught his eye. He froze. The crowbar lowered just an inch. Put it down, son, I said. My voice low and steady, the voice of a man who spent 40 years managing construction sites and dealing with men much tougher than him. You are making a mistake you cannot come back from. You are the mistake, Brittany shrieked, stepping over the broken door frame. Look at him threatening us with a gun. I got it all on video, Harlon. You are going to jail. You're going to rot in a cell, and we are going to sell this place and turn it into a parking lot if we want to. I took a sip of my bourbon. The liquid burned pleasantly on its way down. You seem to be confused about how the law works in this state. Brittany Preston took another step, his fear turning back into anger. I am not confused. I have the title. You signed it over to us 5 years ago. You are just a guest here, a guest we just evicted. Now get up. Just then, the wail of sirens cut through the humidity of the afternoon air. Blue and red lights flashed against the living room walls, bouncing off the family photos that Brittany had already taken down and stacked in a box by the fireplace. Finally, Preston sneered. The police? Good. They will drag you out of here since I can't. 2 officers walked through the broken doorway, hands on their holsters. It was Sheriff Miller, a man I had fished with for 20 years, and a young deputy I did not recognize. Miller looked at the broken door, the crowbar in Preston's hand, and then at me sitting calmly in my chair. Drop the weapon, son. Miller said, his voice flat. Preston dropped the crowbar with a clatter. Sheriff, thank God. You have to arrest him. He changed the locks on my house. He is refusing to leave. He has a gun. Miller looked at the shotgun on the table, broken open, and unloaded, clearly being cleaned. Then he looked back at Preston. I see a man sitting in his own living room, and I see you breaking and entering with a deadly weapon. Brittany pushed forward, shoving her phone in the sheriff's face. Are you blind? We own this house. Look up the records. Harlon Ford transferred the title to Preston Ford and Brittany Ford in 2019. We are the owners. He is trespassing. Miller sighed, adjusting his belt. He looked tired. He hated domestic disputes, especially when they involved people he respected. Harlon? He asked, looking at me. Is that true? I reached into the inside pocket of my vest and pulled out a folded document. It was not the deed. It was something much more powerful. Something Preston and Brittany had apparently never bothered to read when they were so eager to grab the house 5 years ago. Officers, I said, standing up for the first time. My knees popped, but I stood tall. It is true that I transferred the remainder interest of this property to my son and his wife. However, if you look at paragraph 3, section A of the transfer deed, you will see a very specific clause. I handed the document to Sheriff Miller. He put on his reading glasses and squinted at the paper. It is called a life estate. I explained, looking directly at Preston, watching the color drain from his face. In the state of Texas, a life estate deed means that while you might own the house after I die while I am breathing, I am the sole owner of the rights to use and possess this property. I have the right to live here. I have the right to rent it out. And most importantly, I have the right to determine who is allowed to set foot on this property. I pointed a callous finger at the broken door. And right now, I am revoking your permission to be here. Preston stammered, looking at the sheriff. That is not real. That is just legal mumbo-jumbo. It is my house. I pay the property taxes. Actually, I corrected him. I pay the taxes, I pay the insurance. And according to this document, until my heart stops beating, this is my castle. And you two just broke down the gate. Miller handed the paper back to me and turned to Preston. He is right, son. The law is clear. As the life tenant, Mr. Ford has full possession of the property. You are technically the remainder man. You get the house when he passes. But as of this moment, you are trespassing on private property. Brittany screamed, lowering her phone. This is insane. We have clothes here. We have furniture here. You can arrange a time with the sheriff to come pick them up, I said coldly. But you will not sleep here tonight. Not after you tried to throw me into a nursing home like a bag of old garbage. Preston looked at me, his eyes pleading for a second, the anger replaced by the realization of what he had just done. Dad, please. We sold our apartment. We have nowhere else to go. You cannot do this. I looked at the broken door frame. I looked at the crowbar lying on the floor, the tool he had brought to threaten his own father. I thought about the night before when they had woken me up at 2:00 in the morning and tossed a brochure for a cheap assisted living facility on my chest, telling me I was a burden. You should have thought about that before you picked up that crowbar, Preston. Sheriff, I want them removed from my property now. Miller nodded. He stepped forward and took Preston by the arm. Come on, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Or do I need to put the cuffs on for the breaking and entering charge? Preston let out a sob, a pathetic sound for a 40-year-old man, and allowed himself to be let out. Brittany, however, was not done. She stood in the doorway, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. You think you have one, old man? She hissed, her voice dripping with hate. You think a piece of paper is going to save you. You have no idea what we are capable of. You are going to regret this. You will be begging us for help within a week. Get out, I said, turning my back on her to pour myself another drink. I heard her stomp down the porch steps, screaming obscenities at the neighbors who had gathered to watch. I heard the sheriff's cruiser doors slam shut, and then finally silence returned to the ranch house. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. I had won the battle. I had kept my home. But as I looked at the splintered wood of the doorframe, I knew the war had just begun. Brittany was right about one thing. I had no idea what they were capable of. To understand why I sat in that chair with a shotgun watching the police drag my son away, you have to go back 48 hours. You have to understand the night that killed the last bit of love I had left for him. It was a Tuesday and the Texas sky had opened up, unleashing a thunderstorm that rattled the roof tiles I had laid myself 30 years ago. I was in my bedroom, the master suite on the first floor. It was the room I had shared with my wife, Catherine, until the day she took her last breath. Now it was just me and the memories accompanied by the constant, rattling cough that 40 years of inhaling drywall dust and sawdust had left me with. I was in a deep sleep, dreaming of a time when my back did not ache and my house was filled with laughter, not tension. Suddenly, the overhead lights blazed on, blinding and harsh. I blinked, shielding my eyes, my heart hammering against my ribs. Disoriented, I tried to sit up, but my joints were stiff from the damp weather. Standing at the foot of my bed was Brittany. She was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her arms crossed her face, set in a look of absolute disgust. Behind her, hovering in the doorway like a ghost, was Preston. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man whose college tuition I paid for by working double shifts, stood there staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "Get up," Brittany said. Her voice was not loud, but it was cold, colder than the rain lashing against the windows. "You need to pack your things." I squinted at the clock on the nightstand. It was 2:15 in the morning. I rubbed my face, trying to clear the fog of sleep. "Brittany, what is going on? Is something wrong with the house? Is it Leo? Is he sick?" "Leo is fine," she snapped, stepping closer. "The problem is not the house, Harlon. The problem is you. We are done waiting. We are done tiptoeing around you in our own home." I looked at Preston. "Son, what is she talking about?" Preston shifted his weight, looking miserable. "Dad, look. We talked about this. We need the space. Brittany's online business is taking off, and she needs a dedicated studio. This room has the best natural light in the morning, and it is the biggest space." I stared at him, trying to comprehend the words coming out of his mouth. "You woke me up at 2 in the morning because you want my bedroom for a studio. For what?" "For her videos, where she unboxes makeup and complains about her life." Brittany did not let him answer. She grabbed a suitcase from the corner of the room, of my old leather suitcase that I used for work trips back in the day. She threw it onto the bed, the heavy clasps hitting my legs. "Start packing," she ordered. "You are leaving. Leaving to go where?" I asked, my voice rising. "This is my home. I built this room." "Not anymore," she hissed. "We have tolerated you living here for 5 years since you signed the deed over. We thought you would have the decency to move on or pass on by now. But you are still here coughing all night, shuffling around the kitchen, embarrassing us when we have guests. It stops tonight." She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a crumpled brochure. She tossed it onto my chest. I picked it up, my hands shaking. It was a pamphlet for Golden Oaks Assisted Living. I knew Golden Oaks. Everyone in Austin knew Golden Oaks. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. It was a place that smelled of urine and bleach, where the state sent people who had no money and no family who cared. It was cheap, understaffed, and essentially a waiting room for the grave. "You cannot be serious," I whispered. "You want to put me in Golden Oaks?" "It is what we can afford," Preston muttered, finally speaking up. His voice was thin, pathetic. Dad, honestly, it is better for you. They have professionals there. You need care. I need care. I sat up, swinging my legs off the bed, ignoring the pain in my knees. I cook my own meals. I drive my own truck. I fix the leaks in this roof because you are too lazy to learn how. I do not need care, Preston. I need respect. Brittany laughed a sharp, cruel sound. Respect does not pay the bills, Harlon. And frankly, your presence here is costing us money. I can't build my brand with an old man coughing in the background of my live streams. We made a reservation for you. The van comes tomorrow at noon. But you are moving out of this room tonight. I want the painters in here first thing in the morning, tonight, I asked, incredulous. It is storming outside. There is the guest room upstairs, Preston started to say, but Brittany cut him off with a glare. No, she said firmly. The guest room is full of my inventory. He can sleep on the couch, or he can go stay in a hotel if he has any money stashed away that he has not told us about. But this room is mine now. She began grabbing my clothes from the closet, not folding them, just yanking them off the hangers and stuffing them into the suitcase. My flannel shirts, my Sunday suit, the jacket Catherine bought me for our 40th anniversary. She treated them like garbage. Stop it, I shouted, standing up. I moved to stop her, but then I froze. My eyes went to the nightstand. Every night before I went to sleep, I took off my watch and placed it next to the lamp. It was a vintage Rolex Submariner, a gift from Catherine back in 1985 when my construction company landed its first $1 million contract. It was the only valuable thing I owned that wasn't brick and mortar. It was my connection to her. The spot on the nightstand was empty. I looked around frantically. Where is my watch? Brittany stopped stuffing the suitcase. She turned slowly, a smirk playing on her lips. She raised her left wrist. There, hanging loosely on her arm, was my watch. The stainless steel band was far too big for her sliding down her forearm. It looked better on me, don't you think, she said, admiring it under the harsh light. Vintage is very in right now. I figured you wouldn't need it at the nursing home. Things tend to go missing in those places anyway. I am just keeping it safe. The rage that filled me then was not hot, it was cold. It was absolute zero. It was the kind of feeling that makes a man stop shouting and start planning. That watch was not just metal and glass. It was 30 years of marriage. It was the memory of Catherine's smile when she put it on my wrist. And this woman, this parasite, had taken it while I slept. Preston? I said, my voice barely a whisper, tell your wife to take off my watch. Preston looked at Brittany, then at the floor. Dad, it is just a watch. Let her wear it. She likes it. Don't make a scene, just a watch. I looked at my son. Really looked at him for the first time in years. I didn't see the boy I raised. I saw a stranger, a coward, a man who would let his wife strip his father of his dignity just to avoid an argument. Fine, I said. I was suddenly very calm. The shaking in my hands stopped. I walked over to the bed, closed the suitcase she had half filled, and snapped the latches shut. I did not pack my toothbrush. I did not pack my medication. I just took the suitcase. You are being reasonable for once, Brittany said, clearly pleased with herself. Good, now get out. I walked past them out of the bedroom that had been my sanctuary for 40 years. I walked through the living room, past the photos of Leo, past the fireplace. I had built stone by stone. I opened the front door and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit me instantly, soaking my pajamas within seconds. I walked down the driveway to my old Ford pickup truck. I threw the suitcase into the passenger seat and climbed into the driver's side. I did not start the engine. I just sat there shivering, watching the rain blur the view of my own house. I saw the lights go out in the master bedroom. I imagined them in there planning their renovations, laughing at how easy it had been to displace the old man. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. They thought I would drive to a motel or curl up and accept my fate at Golden Oaks. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go. It was uncomfortable. My back screamed in protest. The cold seeped into my bones. I wrapped myself in an old blanket I kept behind the seat for emergencies. I did not sleep that night. I lay there listening to the rain drumming on the metal roof of the truck. And I thought about every sacrifice I had made for Preston. Every overtime hour, every missed vacation, all for him. And this was my repayment. A night in a cold truck and a brochure for a place to die. As the sun began to rise, painting the gray sky with streaks of pale orange, the rain finally stopped. I sat up, my body aching in places I didn't know existed. I looked at the house. It stood silent and imposing. I wiped the condensation from the window. I saw the front door. The lock was a smart lock I had installed for a year ago because Brittany kept losing her keys. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out my phone. I did not call a hotel. I did not call the nursing home. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It was a locksmith I had worked with on construction sites for 20 years. A man who didn't ask questions when Harlon Ford called him at 6:00 in the morning. He answered on the second ring. Frank, I said, my voice raspy but firm. I need a favor. I need you to come over to the house. Bring the heavy-duty deadbolts, the old-fashioned kind, the kind you can't hack with a smartphone. I watched the house as I spoke. And Frank, I added, I need you here in an hour. I have some tenants I need to evict. I hung up the phone. I wasn't a father anymore. I wasn't a retiree. I was a man reclaiming his territory. I opened the truck door and stepped out into the morning air. The sadness was gone. All that was left was the work, and I had a lot of work to do. After the police cruiser disappeared around the corner with my weeping son in the back seat, the silence that settled over my property was heavy. It was the kind of silence you hear right before a tornado touches down. I had won the battle for the bricks and mortar, but my stomach growled a loud reminder that a man cannot eat victory. The pantry was filled with Britain's almond flour and keto snacks, things that looked like birdseed and tasted like cardboard. I needed real food if I was going to survive a siege. I grabbed my keys and climbed back into my Ford F-150. The engine roared to life, a comforting, familiar sound in a world that had suddenly gone sideways. I drove to the H-E-B on the edge of town. It is the only place a Texan goes when he needs to stock up for a storm. I pushed a cart with a wobbly wheel down the aisles, grabbing the essentials. Canned beans, rice, a 10 bag of potatoes, coffee, and a thick brisket. I threw in a bottle of aspirin for my back and a pack of razor blades. I wanted to be clean-shaven when I faced whatever came next. The total came to $250. Not cheap, but necessary. The cashier was a young girl with bright purple hair and a nose ring popping gum as she scanned my items. That will be $21.40, sir, she said, not looking up. I pulled out my credit card, the one I had used for 20 years without a single late payment. I swiped it. The machine beeped a harsh rejection tone. Declined, the girl said, popping a bubble. I frowned. That is not right. Try it again. It must be the chip. It gets dusty. She sighed, clearly annoyed, and inserted it again. Beep. Declined. Sir, do you have another form of payment? She asked, the line of people behind me starting to shift and murmur. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I pulled out my debit card. This one was linked directly to my checking account, the account where my monthly pension and Social Security were deposited. There was plenty of money in there. I had checked it just last week. I punched in my PIN. Processing. Processing. Declined. Contact your financial institution. The words flashed on the small screen like a neon sign of humiliation. A woman behind me cleared her throat loudly. I looked at the cashier, then at my wallet. I had $20 in cash. Not enough for even a tenth of the groceries. I am sorry, I mumbled, feeling smaller than I had in 50 years. I have to step out and make a call. I will be right back. I left the cart there, the brisket sweating on top of the potatoes, and walked out of the store. My hands were shaking as I dialed the bank's fraud department. I assumed my identity had been stolen. I assumed some hacker in a basement had compromised my accounts. It took 10 minutes of navigating automated menus before I got a human being on the line. Mr. Ford, the representative, said, her voice crisp and professional. I see the attempted transactions here. The cards are not malfunctioning. They have been frozen due to insufficient funds and a hold placed on the account holder's request. Insufficient funds, I barked, pacing the parking lot. That is impossible. I have over $450,000 in my retirement savings and $5,000 in checking. I know how to count, young lady. One moment, please. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Sir, I see a transfer initiated at 9:00 a.m. this morning. The entire balance of your savings and checking accounts was transferred to an external account ending in 8821 Ninestro. That was right after I'd called the locksmith, right after I decided to fight back. Transferred by who, I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Who authorized a transfer of $500,000? The authorization came from the account co-signer and power of attorney holder, Mr. Preston Ford, she replied. And the freeze on the remaining credit lines was also requested by him, citing, let me see here, citing concern for the primary account holder's mental capacity and potential for financial self-harm. The phone almost slipped from my hand. 2 years ago, when I was in the hospital with pneumonia fighting for breath, Preston had brought me a stack of papers. He said it was just in case, Dad, so I can pay the electric bill while you were in here. It was a durable power of attorney. I had signed it because he was my son. I had signed it because I trusted him with my life, and he had used it to gut me. He robbed me, I said, staring at the asphalt. He did not pay bills. He stole everything. Sir, if he has a valid power of attorney, the bank acted in accordance with the legal document. If you wish to dispute this, you will need to file a police report and come into a branch with a revocation of the power of attorney. But as of right now, the balance is zero. I hung up. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I just stood there in the H-E-B parking lot surrounded by families loading groceries into their SUVs, laughing and talking about dinner. I was a millionaire. I owned a house worth nearly $2 million. I had built half the commercial strip malls in this county, and I did not have enough money to buy a sandwich. I walked back to my truck. I didn't go back inside for the groceries. I couldn't face the purple-haired girl again. I climbed into the cab of the truck and locked the doors. It felt like a coffin. Hunger was starting to gnaw at my stomach, a sharp physical pain that mixed with the nausea of betrayal. I looked around the interior of the truck. Maybe I had some emergency cash stashed away. I opened the center console. Old receipts, a tire pressure gauge, a few dried-up pens. No cash. I checked the glove box. Registration insurance, a flashlight with dead batteries. No cash. Desperation took over. I started digging under the seats, my fingers scraping against the carpet. I found a quarter covered in sticky soda residue, then a dime, then 2 pennies. I was 70 years old, digging in the dirt for loose change like a junkie. I gathered the coins in my palm, 37 cents. That was my net worth, 37 cents, and a house I couldn't sell because my son's name was on the deed as the remainder man. I sat back up, breathing hard, staring at the coins. They mocked me. This was their plan. Brittany knew they couldn't physically remove me once I played the life estate card. So they decided to starve me out. They decided to make life so unbearable, so impossible, that I would crawl back to them and sign whatever they wanted just to get a hot meal. It was tactical, it was cruel, and it was effective. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me. I looked at the screen. It was a text message from Brittany. The preview showed a picture. I opened it. It was a screenshot of my empty bank account balance circled in red. Below the image, a message followed. Hungry yet, Harlan? I bet the big house feels pretty empty without any food in the fridge. Preston is crying, but I told him this is tough love. We can unlock the accounts in 5 minutes. All you have to do is meet us at the lawyer's office tomorrow morning and sign the waiver for the life estate. We will even let you keep $10,000 to get settled in the nursing home, or you can stay there and chew on the drywall. Your choice. I stared at the message. The sheer malice of it took my breath away. Tough love. That is what she called stealing a man's life work. My stomach growled again, louder this time. I looked at the H-E-B sign shining bright red against the evening sky. I looked at the 37 cents in my hand. I pocketed the coins. I put the truck in gear. I am not chewing on drywall, Brittany, I said to the empty cab. And I am sure as hell not signing your papers. I backed out of the parking spot. I didn't have money for food, but I had a full tank of gas. And I had one thing left that they had forgotten about. I had a box of old tools in the garage. High-quality tools, drills, saws, levels. Things I hadn't touched in years but couldn't bear to throw away. And I knew a pawn shop on 6th Street that stayed open late. It wouldn't be much. Maybe a few hundred, enough for beans and rice, enough to buy a few days. And a few days was all I needed to find a lawyer who hated bullies as much as I did. I drove into the night, the hunger pains sharpening my focus. They wanted a war of attrition. They wanted to see who would break first. They were about to learn that you don't starve a man who knows how to hunt. You just make him more dangerous. The neon sign of the pawn shop on 6th Street buzzed with a low electric hum that sounded like a dying insect. It was a place where dreams went to die, or at least to be put on hold for 20% interest. I parked my truck in the shadows, hoping no one I knew would see me. I had built half the commercial properties on this block back in the 90s. And now here I was walking in with a cardboard box full of my life's work to beg for scraps. I walked to the counter. The smell of stale cigarette smoke and desperation hit me instantly. Behind the glass stood a man I knew vaguely, a guy named Rick, who had bought scrap metal from my sites years ago. He looked at the box in my arms, then at my face. "Rough times, Mr. Ford?" he asked, not unkindly. "You could say that, Rick," I replied, setting the box down. "I need cash, and I need it tonight." I opened the box. Inside were my tools, not the cheap stuff you buy at a hardware store on a weekend. These were professional grade. German drills, Japanese saws, levels that were true to within a millimeter. They were the extensions of my hands. I had built my company with these tools. I had built the house Preston grew up in with these tools. Rick whistled low. "This is good gear, Harlon." "Why are you selling? Just give me a number," I said, looking away. I could not bear to look at the worn handles, the grease stains that marked years of honest labor. Rick poked around. $1,500 for the lot. It was an insult, but I knew he had overheads. I needed more. I needed a war chest. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small velvet pouch I had taken from my dresser before Brittany kicked me out. My hands trembled as I undid the drawstring. I tipped it over, and a gold band rolled onto the glass counter. It was simple, just gold scratched from 40 years of wear. Inside, the inscription read, "Catherine and Harlan, 1974. I had not taken it off since the day she put it on my finger. Even when she died, I kept wearing it because it felt like holding her hand. But Catherine was gone, and if I wanted to save what we had built, I had to sacrifice the symbol to save the substance. "How much for the ring, too?" I asked, my voice cracking. Rick picked it up, weighing it in his hand. He looked at the inscription, then at me. He saw the desperation in my eyes. He saw a man who had been pushed to the edge. $5,000, he said quietly. "For everything." "Cash." "Done," I whispered. He counted out the bills. $50 notes. I took them and shoved them into my pocket. I left the ring on the counter. I walked out of the shop without looking back, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. I had sold my past to buy my future. I drove straight to downtown Austin. The address I was looking for was a sleek glass tower that overlooked the Colorado River. It was the office of Lydia Thorne. In the construction business, you learn who the sharks are. Lydia Thorne was not just a shark. She was a megalodon. 10 years ago, she had represented a client who sued me over a foundation crack that wasn't my fault. She had destroyed me in court. She was ruthless, cold, and brilliant. She was exactly what I needed. I walked into her reception area, ignoring the strange looks from the staff who saw my work boots and dusty jeans. I told the receptionist I had $5,000 in cash, and I needed 5 minutes with Lydia. Money talks. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in her corner office. She looked exactly the same as I remembered. Sharp features, ice blue eyes, a suit that cost more than my truck. "Harlon Ford," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "I haven't seen you since I cross-examined you in 2010. "You look terrible." "I feel terrible, Lydia," I admitted. "But I am not here to reminisce. I am here to hire you." She raised an eyebrow. "You want to hire the woman who cost your insurance company $200,000. I want to hire the woman who won," I corrected her. I reached into my pocket and placed the stack of cash on her mahogany desk. $5,000. Retainer. I know your hourly rate is high. This buys me a start. She looked at the money, then at me. "Who are you fighting, Harlon?" "My son," I said, "and his wife." I told her everything: the life estate, the eviction attempt, the crowbar, and finally the empty bank accounts. I showed her the screenshots of the transfer my son had made that morning. Lydia listened in silence. She did not offer sympathy. She did not offer tissues. She just took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching aggressively against the paper. When I finished, she stopped writing and looked up. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "He emptied the IRA," she asked. "The retirement account?" "Yes," I said. "Every penny." "Did he have a doctor's note declaring you incompetent? Did he have 2 physicians certify that you were unable to manage your affairs?" "No," I said. "I am standing right here. I drove myself here. I am sane." Lydia let out a short, sharp laugh. "Harron, your son is an idiot." "Excuse me?" "He committed a federal crime," she explained, tapping the paper with her pen. "Under the Elder Justice Act and federal banking regulations, a power of attorney does not give someone the right to liquidate a retirement account for their own benefit unless it is strictly for the principal's care. By transferring that money to his personal account while you are sound of mind, he committed wire fraud, embezzlement, and elder financial abuse. The IRS is going to eat him alive for the tax penalties alone." I felt a surge of hope. "So we can arrest him. We can get the money back now." Lydia held up a hand. "No, not yet." "Why not?" I asked, frustrated. "I am broke, Lydia. I just sold my wedding ring to pay you. Because if we strike now, he will panic." She said, her eyes gleaming. "He will claim it was a mistake. He will claim he was just moving it for safekeeping because he thought you were having a mental episode. He might get a slap on the wrist, he might return the money, but he will still come after the house." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You don't just want the money back, Harlon. You want to bury them. You want to make sure they can never touch you again." "Yes," I said. "I do." "Then we wait," she said. "We let them think they have won. We let them spend a little of that money. Once they spend it, it becomes theft beyond a shadow of a doubt. We need to lure them into a trap where they admit their intentions on record. We need to make them feel safe enough to take off their masks." She opened a drawer and pulled out a digital recorder. "Take this," she said. "Wear it everywhere. I am going to draft a dummy agreement, a surrender of the life estate. We are going to offer them a deal. You give up the house, they give you a stipend. They will come running to sign it. And when they do, They will say things they shouldn't. I took the recorder. It felt heavy in my hand. You want me to play dead? I want you to play the victim, she corrected. Be the sad, broken old man they think you are. Make them arrogant. Arrogance creates mistakes. And when they slip up, I will be there to catch them by the throat. I left her office feeling a strange sensation. It wasn't happiness. It was the thrill of the hunt. I had a weapon now. I had a shark in my corner. I drove back to the house as the sun was setting. The front door was still boarded up with plywood where the lock used to be before I fixed it. The house looked lonely in the twilight. As I pulled into the driveway, my headlights swept across the front porch. There was something sitting there right by the steps. I got out of the truck and approached cautiously. It was a black garbage bag tied loosely at the top. It had not been there when I left. Brittany must have come by while I was with Lydia. I frowned. Why would she leave trash on my porch? Was it another insult? I reached down and untied the knot. The smell of stale coffee and perfume wafted out. It was trash from their car, or maybe from the hotel they were staying at. I saw empty fast food wrappers, receipts, and a few crumpled papers. I was about to kick it aside when a flash of color caught my eye. It was a glossy folder, the kind insurance companies use. It was torn in half as if someone had tried to destroy it but was too lazy to shred it. I reached in and pulled out the pieces. I fitted them together in the dim light of the porch lamp. It was a policy document, a life insurance policy. My heart hammered against my ribs. I read the header. Term life insurance insured Harlon Ford beneficiary, Brittany Ford. I scanned the dates. The policy had been taken out 6 months ago. But that wasn't the terrifying part. The terrifying part was a sticky note attached to the back of the folder, written in Brittany's looping, distinctive handwriting. It was a note to herself, or maybe to Preston. It read, "If he goes to the nursing home, decline starts fast. Usually 6 months max. Policy matures in December. Payout covers the crypto loss, plus the house renovation. Just need to hold on until Christmas." I dropped the paper as if it were burning hot. I stumbled back against the truck, gasping for air. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were banking on it. They had a timeline. They had calculated my expiration date to cover their bad investments. The coldness I had felt earlier turned into ice. My son had looked at me as father and seen a lottery ticket that paid out upon death. I looked at the dark windows of my house. I looked at the recorder in my pocket. Lydia was right. We had to wait. We had to let them think they had won. But I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for my life. I picked up the trash bag and carried it inside. I placed the torn insurance policy on the kitchen table next to the recorder. I poured myself a glass of tap water, my hands steady now. They wanted me dead by Christmas. Well, I thought taking a sip. Christmas came early this year. Brittany and you are going to hate your present. I carried the trash bag into the kitchen and dumped the contents onto the table. The smell of stale coffee grounds and rotting fast food filled the room, but I barely noticed. My attention was fixed on the torn pieces of the insurance folder I had taped back together. But there was something else in the pile of garbage that caught my eye. It was a small orange prescription bottle, empty and discarded without its cap. I picked it up, squinting to read the label under the kitchen light. The name on the prescription was Brittany Ford. The medication was alprazolam, a high-strength sedative. I looked at the date it was filled. It was 3 days ago. Then I looked at the fill line. It was empty. 30 pills gone in 3 days. But Brittany did not seem sedated when she was screaming at me on the porch. She did not seem sluggish. She was sharp, energetic, and full of venom. Then I remembered the night of the eviction. I remembered how heavy my sleep had been. I remembered waking up at 2:00 in the morning with a headache that felt like a hammer inside my skull, my limbs feeling like they were made of lead. I had attributed it to age and the humidity of the storm. But now, holding that empty bottle, a cold realization washed over me. They had not just woken me up, they had drugged me. They had slipped something into my evening tea, ensuring I would be disoriented and weak when they launched their ambush. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from a rage so intense it felt like burning coal in my gut. I looked back at the insurance paperwork. I needed to see the details. I needed to know exactly how much my life was worth to them. I scanned the fine print. It was a simplified issue term, life policy $2 million. The application section was filled out in Preston's handwriting. Under the section for medical history, every box for pre-existing conditions was checked. No. No heart issues, no respiratory issues, no history of high blood pressure. They had lied. They had committed insurance fraud. But that wasn't the worst part. I found a rider attached to the back circled in red ink. It was an accidental death benefit clause. If I died by accident, the payout doubled to $4 million. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the house pressing against my ears. They were betting against the clock. They had put me in a cheap nursing home not because they were broke, but because they knew the conditions there would kill me. The mold, the bad food, the lack of medical attention. It would trigger my respiratory issues. It would stop my heart. And if that didn't happen fast enough, well, accidents happen to old men all the time. A fall down the stairs, a mix-up with medication. The note I had found earlier flashed in my mind. Just need to hold on until Christmas. They were not just ungrateful children, they were predators. And I was the prey. I stood up and walked to the sink. I splashed cold water on my face, scrubbing hard, trying to wash away the feeling of betrayal. When I looked up at my reflection in the window, I didn't see a victim. I saw a man who had survived job site accidents, economic recessions, and the death of his beloved wife. I was still standing. If they wanted a show, I would give them a show. But first I needed insurance of my own. I went to the garage and unlocked my heavy tool cabinet. The pawn shop had taken my best hand tools, but they hadn't taken my supplies. On the top shelf behind boxes of nails and screws, I had a box of security equipment I had bought for a job site that got canceled last year. High micro cameras, motion sensors, voice recorders. I spent the next 4 hours working with a precision and energy I hadn't felt in a decade. I was a contractor. I knew the bones of this house better than anyone because I was the one who framed it. I knew where the hollow spaces in the walls were. I knew how to run wires through the vents so they would never be seen. I installed the first camera in the smoke detector in the kitchen, angling it perfectly to capture the table where we always sat. I ran the wire through the ceiling drywall, patching the tiny hole with a dab of spackle and paint I kept for touch-ups. It was invisible. The second camera went into the living room, hidden inside the mesh of the stereo speaker on the bookshelf. It covered the entire seating area and the front door. I placed voice recorders under the dining table and behind the headboard of the bed in the guest room just in case they decided to stay over. I linked everything to a cloud server that Lydia had set up for me, ensuring that even if they found the cameras, they couldn't delete the footage. By the time I was finished, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. My back was screaming in pain and my knees were swollen. But the house was no longer just a home, it was a trap. It was a stage set for their downfall. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the insurance policy one last time. I took photos of every page, every lie, every forged signature. Then I put the papers back in the trash bag, exactly how I found them, and set it by the door. I wanted them to think I was oblivious. I wanted them to think I was just a confused old man who didn't check his own garbage. I sat down at the kitchen table and picked up my phone. It was time. I stared at Preston's number. My thumb hovered over the call button. I closed my eyes and thought about Leo, my grandson. I thought about the fear in his eyes when Brittany yelled. I was doing this for him too. I had to cut the rot out of this family before it infected him completely. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I let the exhaustion take over my voice. I stopped fighting the tremors in my hands. I needed to sound weak. I needed to sound defeated. I dialed. It rang 4 times. Then a groggy, irritated voice answered, "What do you want, Dad?" It is 3:00 in the morning. I let a moment of silence hang in the air, breathing heavily into the receiver. "Preston," I rasped, making my voice crack. "Son, I am hungry." There was a pause on the other end. I heard rustling sheets. Then, Brittany's muffled voice asking who it was. "Dad," Preston said, his voice shifting, becoming sharper. "Did you see the account balance? I saw it," I whispered. "I don't have any money, Preston." "The pantry is empty. My back hurts. I can't sleep on this mattress anymore." "Good." Brittany's voice came through clearly now, likely because she had snatched the phone. "That means it is working. Are you ready to stop being stubborn, Heron? Are you ready to sign?" I let out a sob. It was fake, but the pain behind it was real enough. "I can't do this anymore." "Brittany, you win." "I just want to eat. I just want to see Leo, please." I heard the triumph in her voice practically dripping through the speaker. "We told you this was for your own good. We have the papers ready. We can come over tomorrow evening. We will bring dinner. Pizza? How does that sound?" "That sounds good," I said, making my voice sound small and pathetic. "Please just bring the papers. I will sign anything. Just make it stop." 7 hours or 0, she said. "And Harlan shower and shave?" "You look like a bum. We might have the notary take a picture." The line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed it on the table. The trembling in my hands stopped instantly. I sat up straight, my eyes adjusting to the darkness of the kitchen. They were coming. They were bringing the contract that would strip me of my home, and they were bringing pizza as a reward for my surrender. They thought they were coming to claim their prize. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom of my own making. I looked up at the smoke detector, the tiny black lens barely visible against the white plastic. The red light blinked once, a slow, steady pulse. Recording. I stood up and walked to the sink to wash the dust off my hands. I had a lot to do before 7:00. I had to look the part. I had to set the table, and I had to make sure my lawyer was listening. Tomorrow night, the Ford family would have a reunion, and it would be the last one we ever had. At 6:58 in the evening, I sat at the head of the dining table. I had set the stage perfectly. I wore an old, stained undershirt and sweatpants that hung loosely on my frame. I hadn't shaved in 2 days, giving me a scruffy, defeated look. The house was dim, lit only by the overhead fixture I had rigged with the camera. I'd even rubbed a little flour on my cheeks to make my skin look paler under the light. I looked like a man who had given up. I heard the car doors slam outside. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. They didn't knock. Why would they? In their minds, they were the owners returning to inspect a tenant they were about to evict. The door pushed open and Brittany strode in, first carrying a flat cardboard box that smelled of grease and oregano. Preston trailed behind her, clutching a thick manila envelope to his chest like a shield. They stopped at the edge of the dining room, staring at me. I didn't stand up. I just looked at the pizza box with hungry, desperate eyes. "We brought dinner," Brittany announced, dropping the box onto the table with a thud. It slid across the polished wood, stopping inches from my hand. Little Caesars, $5 hot and ready. That was the price of my dignity, apparently. I opened the box. The pizza was lukewarm, the cheese congealed. I didn't care. I grabbed a slice with trembling hands and shoved it into my mouth, chewing aggressively. I let a piece of pepperoni fall onto the table and didn't pick it up. I needed them to see a broken animal. "Slow down, Dad." Preston said, his voice thick with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "You're going to choke." "Let him eat," Brittany said, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite me. She placed her phone on the table, propping it up against the salt shaker. I saw her swipe the screen and tap the record button. She wasn't live streaming to the world, but I saw the green ring. That meant she was sharing it to her close friends list on Instagram. She wanted an audience for her victory lap. She looked at the camera lens, then back at me, putting on a sad, sympathetic face that made my skin crawl. "See, guys," she said to the phone, her voice pitching up an octave. "We're taking care of him. Even after everything he put us through, we still bring him dinner. Family comes first, right?" I swallowed the dry crust and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I stared at Preston. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the baseboards. "Where is the water?" I rasped. Preston went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of tap water. I drank it in one gulp. "Okay, Harlon," Brittany said, clapping her hands together. "Dinner is served. Now it is time for dessert. Preston, give him the papers." Preston placed the manila envelope in front of me. He slid a sleek, expensive fountain pen on top of it. It was the pen I had given him for his college graduation. Seeing it being used for this felt like a physical slap. "What is this?" I asked, feigning ignorance, my voice shaking. "It is the solution," Dad Preston said softly. "It is the agreement we talked about. It ends the fighting." I opened the folder. Inside was a dense legal document titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Life Estate and Property Rights. I pretended to read it, squinting my eyes, but I had already memorized the key points from the draft Lydia had predicted. I turned the page. Clause 4 stood out. "The grantor hereby waives all rights to reside and access or manage the property located at 1402 Oak Creek Drive, effective immediately upon signature." And then Clause 5. "The grantees agree to provide a monthly stipend of $2,000 to the grantor for living expenses drawn from the family trust managed by the grantees." Family trust. That was a fancy name for the money they'd stolen from my retirement account. $2,000, I whispered, looking up at them. "My mortgage is paid off, but rent in this city is $500 for a studio. That leaves me $500 for food and medicine." Brittany rolled her eyes, checking her manicure. "It is enough if you budget Harlon. Golden Oaks is all-inclusive anyway, so you won't need grocery money. And frankly, considering the legal fees you're going to cost us to fix the mess you made with the locks, it is generous." "But it is my money," I said, leaning in closer to the smoke detector above. "You took $450,000, Preston. Why am I getting an allowance of $2,000 for my own savings?" Preston flinched. "Dad, we didn't take it. We secured it. You were acting erratic." "We had to protect the assets. Protect it." I repeated loud enough for the microphone to catch. "So the money is still there. You haven't spent it." There was a pause, a split second of hesitation that told me everything. "It is invested." Brittany cut in quickly. "We put it into high-yield crypto assets to grow it for your future care. It is tied up right now. That is why we can only give you $2,000 a month. Liquidity issues. You wouldn't understand modern finance. I understood perfectly. They had dumped my life savings into a volatile market to try and recoup their losses. And now they were feeding me crumbs. So I signed this," I said, tapping the paper. "And I leave." "Tonight, tomorrow morning," Brittany corrected. "You can sleep here one last night since we are nice people. But I want the keys on the counter by 8:00 a.m. The contractors are coming at 9:00 to tear out this carpet. It smells like old man." I looked down at the signature line. Harlon Ford. It was waiting for me. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, cold, and smooth. I hovered the nib over the paper. My hand shook violently, a performance I was particularly proud of. Brittany leaned forward, her eyes wide and hungry. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. She was watching her $2 million payday getting closer, inch by inch. "Just sign it, Harlon," she whispered. "Just sign it and you can go back to sleep. No more fighting, no more hunger." Preston watched me, his face pale. I think deep down a part of him knew this was wrong. A part of him remembered the father who had built him a treehouse who had taught him to fish, but he was too weak to stop it. He was a passenger in his own life driven by a woman who saw people as ATMs. I touched the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of ink bloomed on the white page. Then I stopped. I lifted the pen. I laid it down next to the document. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. The silence in the room stretched tight, snapping like a rubber band. "What are you doing?" Brittany hissed, her smile vanishing. "Sign the damn paper." "I will sign it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But I have a condition." "We are not negotiating," Brittany snapped. "This is the deal. Take it or starve." "I'm not asking for more money," I said, looking at Preston. "I am asking for one thing, one small thing. I want to see Leo." Preston looked up surprised. "Leo, yes." I said, "My grandson. I haven't seen him in 2 weeks. I want to say goodbye. If I am going to Golden Oaks, I might not see him for a long time. Bring him here. Let me give him a hug. Let me explain to him that Grandpa is going away on a long trip." Brittany scoffed. "Absolutely not. He is at my mother's house. I am not waking him up and dragging him over here just so you can make a scene and traumatize him." "I am not signing unless I see him," I said calmly. I picked up a slice of cold pizza and took a bite, staring her down. "I have nowhere to be, Brittany. I can sit here all night. You want the house? You want the life estate gone? Bring me the boy." Brittany looked like she was about to scream. She stood up, pacing the room, from her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood. She looked at Preston. She looked at the unsigned paper. She did the math in her head. A 30-minute drive to get the kid versus a $2 million house. "Fine," she spat. "Fine, Preston. Go get him. But if you say one word to him about this mess, Harlon, if you try to turn him against us, I swear I will have you declared mentally incompetent before the ink dries. I won't say a word about the house. I promised. I just want to see him." Preston stood up, relieved to have a task. Relieved to be away from the tension at the table. "I will be back in 40 minutes, Dad. Don't do anything crazy." He hurried out the door. I heard the car start and drive away. Brittany sat back down, glaring at me. She picked up her phone, probably to stop the recording or to text a friend about how annoying I was. I sat there chewing my cold pizzas, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The trap was set. The confession about the money was recorded, the coercion was documented, but bringing Leo here wasn't just a stall tactic, it was the final test. I needed to look Preston in the eye one last time with his son present. I needed to see if there was any humanity left in him when he was standing in front of his own child. And if there wasn't, well, then I would know exactly what I had to do when the police arrived. 40 minutes. Brittany muttered, tapping her fake nails on the table. "You have 40 minutes, old man. Enjoy your last hour as the king of the castle. Because tomorrow you are just another inmate." I said nothing. I just smiled a sad, tired smile and waited for my grandson to come home. The headlights swept across the living room wall, cutting through the dim tension like a searchlight. I heard the car engine cut off, followed by the heavy thud of a door closing. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of what was about to happen to me, but from fear of what I was about to see in my grandson's eyes. The front door pushed open. Preston walked in first, looking exhausted. His shoulders slumped as if he were carrying the weight of the world, or perhaps just the weight of his own conscience. Behind him, rubbing sleep from his eyes, walked Leo. He was wearing his Spider-Man pajamas, the ones I had bought him for his birthday last month. He looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, his hair messy from sleep. He clutched a worn-out blanket to his chest. When he saw me sitting at the table, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Grandpa," he whispered. He ran to me, burying his face in my side. I wrapped my arms around him, smelling the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. I glared at Brittany over his head. She was checking her watch, tapping her foot impatiently, completely unmoved by the fact that her son was trembling. "Hey there, partner," I said softly, smoothing his hair. "I am sorry they woke you up." Leo pulled back and looked at me. His eyes were wide and watery. "Grandpa Mom said you are going away. She said you have to go live in a big building with other old people because you are sick. She said I might not see you for a long time." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, sharper than any heart attack. They had already started the propaganda. They were erasing me from his life before I had even left the building. "I am not sick, Leo," I said, looking directly at Preston. We are just figuring some things out. Figuring." Leo leaned in close, whispering so his mother wouldn't hear. "I don't want you to go, Grandpa. Who is going to help me build the fort in the backyard? Dad is always busy on his computer." I looked up at my son. Preston was standing by the door, staring at his shoes. He couldn't even look at the boy. He couldn't look at the father he was betraying or the son he was neglecting. I squeezed Leo's shoulder. "Don't you worry about the fort, Leo. We will figure it out. Why don't you go sit on the couch for a minute? Grandpa needs to talk to your daddy one last time." Leo nodded and shuffled over to the sofa, curling up with his blanket. He looked so lonely in that big room, a pawn in a game he didn't understand. I stood up slowly. My knees popped a loud sound in the quiet room. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of Preston. He flinched as I approached, as if he expected me to hit him. I didn't want to hit him. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to reach inside him and find the man I thought I had raised. "Preston," I said, my voice low and rough. "Look at me." He slowly raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked miserable. "Good. Look at your son, Preston," I said, pointing to Leo. "And then look at me. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to drive that truck outside. I paid for your wedding. I built this house so you would have a legacy." Preston swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Dad, please. Is this really what you want?" I asked, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. Any flicker of the boy who used to follow me around job sites carrying a plastic hammer? "Do you really want to throw me out on the street? Do you really want to steal my life savings to pay for your mistakes?" Preston opened his mouth. I saw it then, a shimmer of regret, a crack in the armor. He looked at Brittany, then back at me. He opened his mouth to speak, and for a second I thought he might say a no. I thought he might say, "I am sorry, let's stop this." But before he could get a word out, Brittany slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" she shrieked, shattering the moment. Her voice was like breaking glass. "Stop trying to manipulate him, Harron. Stop with the soba stories. We are not doing this to hurt you. We are doing this because we have to survive." She marched over to Preston and grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his shirt. "Tell him, Preston. Tell him we need the money. Tell him we are doing this for Leo's future." Preston looked at her, and I watched the light go out of his eyes. The hesitation vanished, replaced by a hollow resignation. He slumped again, retreating into himself. "Just sign the papers, Dad." He whispered, his voice dead. "Please, just sign them so we can all go to sleep. It is over." I stood there for a long moment looking at him. It was a funeral. I was mourning the death of my son right there in my living room. The man standing in front of me was just a shell, hollowed out by greed and cowardice. He had made his choice. He had chosen the wife who despised him over the father who loved him. "Okay," I said softly, "okay." I turned back to the table. I sat down heavily in the chair. I picked up the pen again. It felt heavier this time, like I was holding a hammer. Brittany was practically vibrating with excitement. She hovered over my shoulder, her eyes glued to the signature line. She was already spending the money in her head. She was already picking out new curtains for my bedroom. I looked at the document. voluntary relinquishment of life estate. It looked so official. It looked so final. I knew because Lydia had told me that this document was legally worthless. It was drafted with deliberate errors referencing a property deed that didn't exist and citing statutes that had been repealed 10 years ago. It was a proper piece of theater, but to them, it was the key to the kingdom. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name, Harlon Ford. I added the date. There, I said, capping the pen. It is done. Brittany snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. She held it up to the light, checking the signature, a wild, triumphant grin spreading across her face. Finally, she breathed. Finally, she looked at me, and the mask of fake sympathy dropped completely. There was no more. We are doing this for you. There was only triumph. Get out, she said. Excuse me, I asked, remaining seated. You heard me? She said, clutching the paper to her chest. Get out of my house, and you signed it. You waived your rights. You are trespassing. Preston looked uncomfortable. Britt, it is late. He can sleep in the guest room tonight. We said he could stay until morning. No, Brittany snapped, turning on him. If he stays, he will break something or steal something. Look at him. He's pathetic. I want him gone now. I want to wake up tomorrow morning in my house without smelling his old man's smell. She turned back to me, pointing at the door. You have 5 minutes to grab whatever fits in your pockets and leave, or I call the sheriff back. And this time I have the paper to prove this is my house. I looked at Leo. He was watching us, terrified, clutching his blanket. I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I looked at Preston one last time. You are going to regret this, son, I said quietly. Not because of what I am going to do, but because of what you have become. He looked away. I walked over to Leo. I knelt down and hugged him. He felt tiny in my arms. Grandpa loves you, I whispered. Remember that. And remember, no matter what Mom says, Grandpa didn't leave you. Grandpa is just going to fix things. I stood up and walked to the door. I didn't take a bag. I didn't take a coat. I walked out into the night air, leaving the door open behind me. I walked down the driveway to the darkness, where I knew the police cars were waiting silently just around the bend. Lydia had timed it perfectly. As I reached the end of the driveway, I heard Brittany cheering inside the house. I heard her popping a bottle of champagne she must have brought with her. Enjoy it, Brittany, I thought, staring up at the moon. Enjoy the champagne because it is the last drink you will ever have in this house. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I dialed Lydia. They signed it, I said, and they kicked me out. The confession is on tape. Good. Lydia's voice came back sharp and deadly. The officers are moving in. Showtime, Harlon. I turned back to look at the house one last time. The lights were blazing. It looked warm and inviting, but inside it was rotten, and it was time to burn the rot out. The darkness of the Texas night did not last long. Just as Brittany's shrill laughter echoed from the open doorway celebrating her victory, the world exploded into a kaleidoscope of red and blue. It wasn't the polite chirping of a local sheriff's cruiser this time. It was a roar of engines and the blinding strobe-like flash of heavy enforcement. I stood at the end of the driveway, bathed in the chaotic light, and watched the color drain from the world. 4 black SUVs swerved into the gravel, blocking the exit, followed by 2 state trooper vehicles. Men in windbreakers with bold yellow lettering leaped out, moving with a speed and precision that told you they were not here for a noise complaint. Brittany dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the porch, the sound lost under the noise of slamming car doors and shouting voices. Preston stumbled out onto the porch, blinking rapidly, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. "What is going on?" he shouted, shielding his eyes. "Who are you people? Get off my property!" A tall woman in a sharp blazer stepped out from behind the wall of officers. It was Lydia. Beside her walked a man who looked like he chewed iron for breakfast. He flashed a badge that caught the strobe lights. Preston Ford. The man boomed his voice, carrying easily over the commotion. I am Special Agent Miller with the Texas Economic Crimes Unit, accompanied by agents from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant for your arrest. Preston's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the porch railing to stay upright. Arrest for what? I didn't do anything. This is my house. My father is trespassing. Agent Miller walked up the steps unfazed by Preston's whining. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. You are under arrest for first-degree felony exploitation of an elderly individual, wire fraud, and tax evasion related to the unauthorized liquidation of a federally protected retirement account. Brittany let out a screech that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human being. What are you talking about? Lydia stepped forward, then standing at the bottom of the steps, looking up at them like a judge passing a death sentence. We have the bank records, Preston, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. We have the digital footprint of the transfer you made at 9:00 this morning. $450,000 moved from your father's IRA into a personal crypto wallet registered in your name. You did not have medical clearance. You did not have judicial oversight. You just took it. Preston looked at me standing in the shadows of the driveway. His eyes were wide, filled with a sudden, terrifying clarity. He realized in that second that the hungry, defeated old man he had mocked 10 minutes ago had actually been the executioner waiting to drop the axe. Dad. He stammered, tears instantly welling up. Dad, tell them it was a misunderstanding. I was protecting the money for you. Tell them? I walked slowly toward the porch. I did not look at him with anger. I looked at him with pity. I can't tell them that, son, I said softly. Because I have a recording in my pocket where you admitted you spent it. Where you admitted you were giving me an allowance for my own stolen money. Preston turned to Brittany, panicked, seizing his entire body. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her silk sleeve. She told me to do it, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at his wife. It was her idea. She said the crypto market would bounce back. She said we could pay it back before he noticed. I didn't want to. She made me. Brittany recoiled as if she had been touched by a leper. She shoved him away so hard he almost fell off the porch. You shut your mouth. She yelled, her face twisted into a mask of pure self-preservation. I didn't sign anything. That transfer was from your login. The money went to your wallet. Do not try to pin your felony on me, you loser. I watched them turn on each other. It took less than 30 seconds. The love, the partnership, the united front against the old man, it all evaporated the moment the handcuffs came out. They were not a family. They were accomplices, and the loyalty of thieves is a fragile thing. Agent Miller nodded to his team. 2 officers moved up the steps. They grabbed Preston's arms and spun him around. Preston Ford, you have the right to remain silent. The officer recited, the metallic click of the handcuffs sounding louder than the sirens to my ears. Preston began to sob loud, heaving cries that shook his whole body. No, please. I have a son. I have a job. You can't take me? Dad, please. Then I heard a small sound that broke my heart. Daddy. I looked up. Leo was standing in the doorway, clutching his blanket, his eyes wide with terror as he watched the police manhandle his father. My heart stopped. This was the one thing I wanted to avoid. This was the collateral damage of war. I moved faster than I had in 20 years. I rushed up the steps, pushing past a startled agent, and dropped to my knees in front of my grandson. I pulled him into my chest, burying his face in my shoulder, using my own body to block his view of his father being dragged down the stairs. Don't look, Leo, I whispered fiercely, stroking his hair. Close your eyes. It is just a game. It is just a misunderstanding. Grandpa is here." I felt him shaking against me, his tears soaking my shirt. I held him tight, glaring at Brittany over his head. She was standing there, frozen, her face pale, watching her husband being shoved into the back of a black SUV. She wasn't looking at Leo. She wasn't trying to comfort her son. She was calculating. I could see the gears turning in her eyes. She was thinking about herself. Preston continued to scream my name as they closed the car door, cutting off his pleas. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Lydia walked up the steps and stood next to me. She looked at Brittany with a cold, professional disdain. "Mrs. Ford," Lydia said, "we will be seizing the assets in that crypto wallet immediately, and given your husband's arrest for financial crimes against a vulnerable senior social services, we'll be conducting an investigation into the welfare of this child." Brittany finally snapped out of her trance. She looked at Lydia, then at me, holding her son. Her shock was replaced by a sudden desperate defiance. "You think you have won?" She spat, her voice trembling but venomous. "You sent your own son to jail. You monster. But guess what? Preston might be an idiot, but I am not." She stomped her foot on the porch, the sound hollow against the wood. "I am still his wife, and this house is community property. Even if he goes to prison for 100 red years, I still own 50% of this building. I have the deed. I have the paperwork you signed, Harlon." She pointed a manicured finger at my face. "You can't kick me out. I am the owner. And tomorrow morning I am going to sell this place, take my half of the equity, and leave you with nothing but your guilt. You hear me? Nothing." I stood up, lifting Leo into my arms. He was heavy, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him stand near her. I looked at Brittany. I saw the fear behind her eyes. She was bluffing. She was terrified. But she was right about one thing. In Texas, the house was marital property. If she held onto it, she could force a sale. She could drag this out for years in civil court while I rotted in a rental apartment. She thought she had played her ace. She thought the bricks and the wood were the only things that mattered. I handed Leo to Lydia, who took him gently, her expression softening for the first time. "Take him to the car, Lydia," I said quietly. "He doesn't need to hear this." Lydia nodded and carried the boy down the steps, whispering comforting words to him. I turned back to Brittany. She stood there, arms crossed, chin high, standing on the porch of the house she thought was her fortress. "You are right, Brittany," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "You do own the house, the structure, the roof, the walls, the granite countertops you picked out. You own all of it." She sneered. "Exactly. So get off my property before I call the cops back and have you arrested for harassment." I reached into my back pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I didn't pull out money. I pulled out a thick, yellowed file folder that smelled of dust and old paper. It was dated 1985. I tapped the folder against my hand. "You guys were always so focused on the house. I said you loved the ranch style. You loved the renovations. When I signed the deed over to you 5 years ago, you were so excited to get the keys to the building." I took a step closer to her. "But you never asked about the dirt, Brittany." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder and pulled out a land survey and a commercial lease agreement. I said you own the house, but you forgot one very important detail about real estate law. I held up the document so she could read the header. Ford Land Holdings, LLC. "When I bought this place 40 years ago, I didn't buy it in my name," I explained. "I bought the land under a limited liability company I formed to protect my assets. When I built this house, I kept the land separate." I watched as the blood drained from her face. She was starting to understand. "When I gave you the house, I continued relentless. I only transferred the improvements, the structure, the physical building, but the land underneath it, the dirt you are standing on right now, that still belongs to Ford Land Holdings, and I am the sole proprietor of that company. I pulled out the second document. It was a lease agreement. For the last 5 years, your ownership of this house has been subject to a ground lease, a month-to-month ground lease. And guess what, Brittany? I dropped the file onto the porch table next to her cold pizza. I am canceling the lease. Brittany stared at the papers, her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't do that. That's not real. It is very real, I said. And under Texas property law, when a ground lease expires and is not renewed, the tenant that is you has exactly 30 days to vacate the land. I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the night air. And since you own the house, you have to take it with you. Take it with me, she squeaked. Yes, I said. You have 30 days to pick up this 2,000 QFT brick house and move it somewhere else. If you don't remove your property from my land by the deadline, I have the legal right to charge you storage fees, $500 a day. Or I can simply call a bulldozer and clear my land of the debris. Brittany looked at the massive brick pillars of the house. She looked at the sprawling roof. Moving a house like this would cost $100,000, money she didn't have, money Preston didn't have. She realized then that her 50% equity was worth absolutely nothing. A house without land is just a pile of expensive bricks. She sank onto the porch swing, the fight draining out of her instantly. She looked small. She looked defeated. You planned this, she whispered. You knew this the whole time. I didn't plan to use it, I said. I kept it as an insurance policy, just like the one you took out on my life. The difference is, my policy doesn't require anyone to die. It just requires you to leave. I turned my back on her and walked down the steps. The police lights were fading in the distance. The show was over. You have 30 days, Brittany, I called back over my shoulder. And bring a shovel. You're going to need it. I walked to Lydia's car, where Leo was waiting. I was tired. I was heartbroken. But for the first time in a long time, I was the king of my castle again, and the usurpers were finally gone. Those 30 days were not quiet. You might think that after the police dragged Preston away and Brittany fled into the night, peace would return to Oak Creek Drive. You would be wrong. The silence I had won was fragile, the kind of calm that sits heavy on the air before a tornado touches down. Brittany was cornered, and a cornered animal does not go quietly. She bites, she scratches. And when she has a smartphone and an internet connection, she lies. The war shifted from my living room to the digital world. The next morning, as I was reinforcing the front door with 3-in screws and a new deadbolt, my neighbor Mrs. Higgins walked by with her poodle. She stopped at the edge of the driveway looking at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Harlon, she called out, keeping her distance. I saw Brittany's post this morning. Is it true? Did you really pull a gun on her while she was holding Leo? I lowered my drill. The rumors had started. Brittany had taken to social media, spinning a narrative where I was the senile, violent aggressor, and she was the saintly mother trying to protect her child. She was trying to win the court of public opinion since she had lost in the court of law. I walked down the driveway, wiping sawdust from my hands. Martha, I said gently, you have known me for 20 years. You know I taught your grandson how to fish. Do you really think I would endanger a child? She looked at my eyes then, at the sturdy new lock I was installing. She sighed, shaking her head. It didn't sound like you, Heron, but the picture she posted, she has a bruise on her arm. She got that bruise when she tried to shove Preston off the porch while he was being arrested. I said, my voice flat. The police report is public record, Martha. You can read it down at the station. Preston is in jail for robbing me. Brittany is facing eviction. That is the truth. Mrs. Higgins nodded slowly. I will pray for you, Harlon, and for that boy. I went back to work. I didn't have time for Facebook wars. I had a deadline to enforce. By day 7, the desperation began to manifest in physical ways. A real estate agent showed up a young man in a suit that was too tight and shoes that had never touched a construction site. He parked his BMW right in the middle of my driveway and marched up to the porch as if he owned the place. Mr. Ford, he said, flashing a blinding white smile. My name is Chad. I am representing Mrs. Brittany Ford. We are here to facilitate the immediate sale of the property to liquidate assets. We have a cash buyer lined up. I didn't get up from my rocking chair. I just took a sip of my iced tea. You are trespassing, Chad. He laughed a nervous, dismissive sound. Now, Harlon, let's be reasonable. Brittany has the deed to the structure. She has the right to sell. We can have a check in your hand by Friday if you just sign a waiver regarding the land lease. We are talking about a lot of money, enough to get you into a very nice facility. There it was again. The assumption that I was just an obstacle to be paid off or moved aside. I set my glass down. Chad, do you know what a clouded title is? He blinked. Excuse me. I stood up and walked to the railing. I told Brittany she has 23 days left to move this house. If you sell this house to a cash buyer, are you going to disclose to them that the land underneath it is not included? Are you going to tell them that on day 30, I am bringing in a demolition crew? He pawed. You can't do that. That would be destruction of property. I pulled the lease agreement from my pocket. I kept it on me at all times now. Red Claw 17 Sun. Restoration of premises. If the structure is not removed, it becomes abandoned debris. I am not destroying property. I am cleaning up my yard. Chad looked at the document. He looked at the brick house. He looked at me. He realized he was standing in the middle of a legal minefield that would destroy his license if he tried to sell a house that was legally slated for demolition. He backed away, his smile gone. I will have to consult with my broker. You do that, I said, and tell Brittany to stop sending errands boys. If she wants to talk, she can bring a mover. He drove away and I never saw him again. But Brittany wasn't done. On day 15, the bank started sniffing around. A black sedan with tinted windows parked across the street. A man sat inside taking pictures of the house. I knew who he was. He was an asset manager. The bank that held the loan on Britain's renovation projects was getting nervous. They knew Preston was in jail. They knew the payments had stopped. They were trying to figure out if their collateral was safe. I walked out to the street and knocked on his window. He rolled it down just an inch. You are wasting your film, I told him. He looked at me over his sunglasses. Mr. Ford, we have a lien on this property. You have a lien on the bricks, I corrected him. I own the dirt. And unless you want to pay to move this house to a storage lot, your lien is about to be worth $0. He didn't say anything. He just rolled up the window and drove off. I knew what he was going to do. He was going to call the legal department. He was going to realize that foreclosure was a losing game. Because even if they took the house, they would still owe me rent for the land. They were stuck. And when a bank is stuck, they cut their losses. That was exactly what I was counting on. Day 21 brought the repo man. I was in the garage sharpening my chisels when I heard the distinct sound of a diesel tow truck. I walked out to see a flatbed backing up to Brittany's Porsche Cayenne, which she had foolishly left parked on the street a few blocks over, likely trying to hide it. But repo men are like bloodhounds. I watched from my driveway as they hooked it up. I didn't feel joy. I felt a grim satisfaction. The facade was crumbling. The Porsche the designer closed the country club memberships, it was all built on a foundation of debt and theft. And now that the foundation was gone, the whole structure was collapsing. On day 29, the house felt different. The air was thick with anticipation. I had spent the last week clearing the perimeter. I moved my truck to the back of the lot. I took down the bird feeders. I covered the rose bushes with tarps. I was preparing for a funeral. Not for a person, but for a dream. This house was supposed to be the legacy I left my family. It was supposed to be the place where my grandchildren grew up. Instead, it had become a monument to their greed. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the Texas sky a bruised purple, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello," I answered. "Harlon." It was Brittany. Her voice was different. The screeching arrogance was gone, replaced by a slur that suggested she had found comfort in a bottle of wine. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" I looked out at the lawn where I had already marked the demolition lines with orange spray paint. "The contract is clear, Brittany. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow." There was a long silence on the other end, filled with ragged breathing. "I hate you," she whispered. "You ruined everything." "We were happy before you got in the way. We were going to be rich." "You were never rich, Brittany," I said softly. "You were just expensive." "And I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for the illusion." She hung up. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the cabinets I had installed, the crown molding I had cut by hand. It broke my heart to know that it might all be gone tomorrow. But a man has to have a code. If I backed down now, if I let them keep the house out of sentimentality, they would never learn. They would think that tears and threats were valid currency. They would think that consequences were just suggestions. I had to be the rock. I had to be the immovable object. I went to bed early that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house settle. I listened to the wind in the eaves. I said goodbye to the walls. If the bank didn't fold, if Brittany didn't find a miracle, I was ready to give the order. I would rather live in a tent on my own land than live in a mansion owned by people who wanted me dead. The sun came up on the 30th day, bright and unforgiving. I made a pot of coffee, strong and black. I put on my work boots. I put on my best vest. I walked out to the porch and waited. At 8:30, the ground began to tremble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the heavy tread of the dozers coming down the street. I watched them turn into the driveway, their steel blades gleaming in the morning light. They looked like prehistoric beasts, hungry and patient. I nodded to the foreman. He nodded back. We didn't need to speak. He knew the job. I checked my watch. 8:45. 15 minutes left. The siege was over. The negotiation was done. Now it was just a matter of seeing who would blink first, the bank or the bulldozer. The thrum of heavy diesel engines vibrating through the ground is a sound that usually signals the beginning of something new, a foundation being poured or a frame going up. But on the morning of the 30th day, the roar of the yellow Caterpillar bulldozers idling at the edge of my property signaled the end. I stood on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the exhaust plumes rise into the humid Texas air. I had hired the demolition crew for the day, paying them a premium just to park their blades lowered, facing the house, like mechanical bulls ready to charge. It was expensive theater, but necessary to drive the final nail into the coffin of Brittany's arrogance. A rusted, dented Toyota Corolla pulled up to the curb, sputtering as the engine died. It was a far cry from the silver Porsche Cayenne Brittany used to parade around town. That car had been repossessed 2 weeks ago, clawed back by the dealership when the payments bounced. The woman who stepped out of the Corolla looked like a stranger. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a t-shirt that looked 2 sizes too big. She looked gaunt, stripped of the makeup and jewelry that she had used as armor against the world. She didn't storm up the driveway this time. She walked slowly, her eyes fixed on the bulldozers, terror etched into every line of her face. She stopped at the edge of the lawn, afraid to cross the invisible property line I had drawn in the sand. Lydia was already there, standing next to me, holding a thick binder. She checked her watch. "It is 9 a.m. Lydia said, her voice carrying over the idle of the engines. "The deadline has expired. The ground lease is officially terminated." Brittany looked at me, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered, the fight completely gone from her voice. "Don't do it. Don't tear it down." "I am not the one tearing it down, Brittany," I said, leaning against the railing. "You are. By failing to remove your property from my land, you have abandoned it, and I have every right to clear the debris." "I tried." She sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "I called every moving company in the state. No one would touch it without $100,000 up front. I applied for loans. I tried to sell the fixtures. Nobody wants to buy a house. They have to move." Lydia stepped forward. "We know you tried, Mrs. Ford. We received the notice of your Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing yesterday afternoon. It was a smart move to try and stay the execution, but unfortunately for you, the bankruptcy trustee came to the same conclusion we did." Brittany looked at Lydia, confused and hopeless. "What conclusion?" "That the asset is a liability," Lydia explained coldly. "The trustee abandoned the property interest this morning. The bank that held your equity loan has also refused to foreclose because they don't want to deal with the demolition costs." I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. It meant that on paper, Brittany was still the owner of a 2,000 square FT pile of bricks that was about to be turned into rubble, and she had absolutely no way to stop it. She was insolvent, she was homeless, and she was alone. "Where is Leo?" she asked suddenly, looking around wildly. "I want to see my son." I set my coffee cup down on the railing. The sound was sharp in the morning air. "You don't have custody of Leo anymore, Brittany." She froze. "What did you say? The family court issued an emergency order this morning?" I said, with Preston facing 5 to 10 years in federal prison for elder abuse and fraud, and you filing for bankruptcy with no fixed address and no income, the judge determined that neither of you is fit to care for a minor child. Her knees gave out and she sank onto the dry grass. "No, no, you can't take him. He is my baby. He is 8 years old," I said, my voice hardening. "And for the last 2 years, you have used him as a pawn. You drugged his grandfather. You taught his father to steal. You created a toxic environment that the court found immediate and dangerous." I pulled a document from my back pocket and held it up. "I have been granted temporary guardianship." I said, "Leo is inside in his room playing video games with headphones on. He doesn't know you are here, and he is not going to see you like this." Brittany wailed a sound of pure despair that made the demolition crew look away uncomfortably. She had lost the money. She had lost the house. She had lost her husband. And now, because of her own greed, she had lost her son. A black sedan pulled into the driveway behind Brittany's beat-up car. A man in a suit got out carrying a briefcase. It was the representative from the bank that had lent Preston and Brittany the money for their lavish renovations, securing it against the house structure. He walked past Brittany without even looking at her and approached the porch. "Mr. Ford," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We received your proposal." I nodded. "Good. The bulldozers are ready to roll. If we don't have a deal in 5 minutes, I give the signal." The banker looked at the massive machines, then at the beautiful brick house. He knew that if I demolished it, the bank's collateral would be destroyed and they would get nothing. Brittany had already declared bankruptcy, so they couldn't go after her. Their only hope of salvaging anything was me. "We accept," the banker said quickly. $50,000 for the structure as is where is. We transfer the title of the improvements to you immediately. $50,000. Brittany gasped from the grass. "That house is appraised at $1.8 million. You can't sell it to him for $50,000. The banker turned to her, his face filled with disdain. It is worth $1.88 million on a piece of land. Ma'am, sitting here facing demolition, it is worth scrap value. Actually, Mr. Ford is doing us a favor. If he demolishes it, we would be liable for the cleanup costs since you defaulted. $50,000 is generous. I pulled a cashier's check from my pocket. It was money from the first installment of the dividends Alfred's company had paid out. $50,000. Pocket change compared to what the house was worth. But it was the price of my victory. I handed the check to the banker. He handed me the title transfer. It was done. The house, the land, the furniture, everything was legally mine again. The life estate was no longer just a right to live there. I owned the whole kingdom free and clear. I turned to the foreman of the demolition crew and waved my hand. Cut the engines, boys. We are done here. The roar of the diesels died down, leaving a ringing silence in the air. I looked down at Brittany. She was still sitting in the grass staring at the house she had tried to steal, realizing she had just watched it be sold for the price of a luxury car. You should go, Brittany, I said quietly. She looked up at me, her eyes red and hollow. I have nothing, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single $20 bill. I walked down the steps and dropped it on the grass next to her. Get some gas, I said. Drive to your parents. Maybe they will take you in. But don't come back here. If you step foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. And Brittany, if you want to see Leo again get a job, get clean and follow the court's orders. But you will never, ever have control over him or this house again. She stared at the money. For a second, I thought she would spit on it, but pride is a luxury she could no longer afford. Her shaking hand reached out and snatched the bill. She stood up unsteady, brushing the grass from her knees. She looked at the house one last time, a look of pure longing and regret. Then she looked at me, and I saw that the hatred was gone, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. She had gambled her soul and lost. She turned and walked to her rusted car. She got in the engine, coughing to life with a struggle. As she backed out of the driveway, she didn't look back. She just stared straight ahead, driving away into a future that was as empty as her promises. I stood there for a long time, watching the dust settle. Lydia put a hand on my shoulder. It is over, Harlan, she said softly. You won. I looked at the title in my hand. I looked at the house that was finally truly mine. I won. I agreed. I turned and walked back up the steps. I had a grandson to raise. I had a legacy to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, the air tasted clean. The first thing I did was order a dumpster, a massive 30-yard steel container that I dropped right in the middle of the driveway. For the next 2 weeks, the neighbors watched as I purged my home of the infection. I tore out the gray laminate flooring Brittany had installed over my beautiful original oak hardwoods. I ripped down the cheap velvet curtains. I smashed the hollow core doors they had put in to replace the solid pine ones I had hung 40 years ago. Every swing of the hammer felt like exorcising a demon. Underneath the master bed, I found a stash of unopened, overdue notices. Credit cards, car loans, personal loans. They had been drowning in debt while drinking champagne. It confirmed what I already knew. They didn't hate me because I was old. They hated me because I was the only thing standing between them and the bankruptcy court. But cleaning the house was the easy part. The hard part was the drive to Huntsville. 3 months into Preston's sentence, I decided to go. I needed to look him in the eye one last time. I needed to know if there was anything left of my son in there, or if he was truly gone. The visiting room at the Huntsville unit smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. It was a cold, gray place designed to strip a man of his spirit. When they brought Preston out, I barely recognized him. He had lost 20 lb. His hair was shaved close to his scalp. He looked small. He looked like a child wearing a costume that didn't fit. He sat down on the other side of the glass and picked up the phone. His hands were shaking. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "You came—" I just nodded, holding the receiver to my ear. I didn't smile. I didn't offer comfort. I just listened. "I knew you wouldn't abandon me," he said, a desperate hope lighting up his eyes. "Look, I can explain everything. It was Brittany. She manipulated me. She controlled the finances. I didn't want to take your money, Dad. She made me do it." I watched him spin his web of lies, blaming everyone but himself. He blamed his wife. He blamed the economy. He even blamed me for being too difficult to talk to. He hadn't learned a thing. He was still the same coward who stood by while his wife threw my clothes into a suitcase. I stopped him. "Preston, look at me." He fell silent, blinking. "I am not here to bail you out," I said calmly. "I am not here to put money on your commissary books, and I am certainly not here to help you appeal your sentence." His face fell. "Then why are you here?" "I am here to say goodbye," I said. He looked confused. "Goodbye? But I get out in 5 years. I can come home. We can rebuild." "No," I said, leaning in closer to the glass. "You can't. The house is in a trust now. The locks are changed, and the man who raised you died the night you picked up that crowbar." Tears streamed down his face. "Dad, please. I am your son. You are a man who stole from the vulnerable." I said, "You are a man who chose money over blood. You made your bed, Preston. Now you have to sleep in it." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for the guard to take him away. I stood up and walked out of the prison. I walked out into the bright, hot Texas sun. I got into my truck and drove for 3 hours without turning on the radio. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Leo sitting on the porch steps waiting for me. He had a baseball glove on one hand and a big smile on his face. "Did you see him?" Leo asked. I looked at my grandson. I saw the kindness in his eyes that his father had lost long ago. I saw someone I said climbing out of the truck, but he wasn't anyone we know. I picked up my own glove from the toolbox. "Come on, kid. Let's see your fastball." That was the day I finally let go. That was the day the ghost of my son stopped haunting these halls. 6 months have passed since the bulldozers idled on my lawn, and the war for 1402 Oak Creek Drive ended. The Texas summer has given way to a crisp, golden autumn. The humidity that used to make my joints ache has lifted, replaced by a dry, cool breeze that rustles the leaves of the old oak trees I planted 40 years ago. I sit on the front porch in my favorite rocking chair. The wood cacks rhythmically, a sound that used to annoy me, but now sounds like a heartbeat. The front door has been replaced. It is solid mahogany, now reinforced with steel with a deadbolt that feels heavy and secure in my hand. There are no splinters left to remind me of the crowbar. I sanded them down and stained the frame myself. It took 3 days, but erasing the scars of that night was the first step in healing the house. In my hand, I hold a glass of Poppy Van Winkle bourbon. It is 23 years old and costs more than my first truck. I bought it with the interest from the first dividend check that came from the investments Lydia and my financial advisor set up. It tastes like smoke and caramel, but mostly it tastes like peace. Out in the yard, the silence I used to dread has been replaced by the crack of a baseball bat hitting leather. Leo stands near the rose bushes, wearing a glove that is slightly too big for him. His face scrunching in concentration as he throws the ball into the pitchback net I set up. "Good arm, Leo," I call out. "Keep your eye on it." He turns and beams at me. His cheeks are rosy, filled out now. He has gained 10 lbs since coming to live with me. It turns out that a growing boy needs more than almond flour crackers and kale smoothies. He needs pot roast. He needs mashed potatoes with real butter. He needs my brisket slow cooked for 12 hours until it falls apart on the fork. We cook together every night. He is learning to chop vegetables. He is learning to measure flour. He is learning that food is love made edible, not just fuel to be counted in calories. I watch him run to retrieve the ball, his laughter ringing clear in the afternoon air. He is happy. He is safe. The nightmares about his mother screaming have started to fade, replaced by dreams of home runs and fishing trips. We go fishing every Saturday now. I bought a small boat. We sit on the lake, just the two of us, and we don't say much. We just let the water heal us. The mailman drives by and waves. I wave back. On the small side table next to my bourbon, there is a stack of envelopes. They arrive every Tuesday like clockwork. They are stamped with the seal of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The return address is the Huntsville unit. Preston writes to me every week. I pick up the top letter. The envelope is thin, the paper inside cheap and rough. I run my thumb over his handwriting. It is shaky, not the arrogant scrawl he used when he signed the power of attorney. I have not opened a single one. Lydia tells me he is doing well, or as well as a soft man can do in a hard place. He pleaded guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for a 5-year sentence. He will probably be out in 2 or 3 with good behavior. He works in the prison library. He is taking classes. Maybe the letters are full of apologies. Maybe he is begging for forgiveness. Maybe he is blaming Brittany. I don't know. I am not ready to know. I look at the stack of unopened letters, and I feel a dull ache in my chest. It is the ghost of the love I had for him. I don't hate him anymore. Hate takes too much energy, and I am too old to waste my strength on men who don't deserve it, but I don't trust him either. Trust is like a mirror. You can fix it if it breaks, but you can still see the crack in that mother's reflection. And Preston smashed the mirror into dust. Brittany is gone. The bankruptcy court stripped her of everything. The last I heard, she moved back in with her parents in Dallas. She works retail now. She sends cards to Leo sometimes. I let him read them, but he doesn't ask to call her. Children have an instinct for survival. He knows that being around her feels like walking on broken glass, and he prefers the solid ground of my house. I take a sip of the bourbon, letting the warmth spread through my chest. I have aged 10 years in the last 6 months. My hair is whiter. My walk is a little slower. The fight took something out of me that I will never get back. But it gave me something in return. It gave me clarity. I open the thick leather file folder resting on my lap. Inside are the new trust documents Lydia drafted. This time there are no loopholes, there are no shortcuts. The Ford Family Trust. Primary beneficiary, Leo Ford. Trustee, Harlon Ford. I am not leaving the house to Preston. I am skipping a generation. This house, this land, the money I recovered, it is all going into a trust for Leo. He will get it when he turns 25, provided he finishes school and proves he is a man of character. I spent 40 years building houses for other people. I laid foundations, I framed walls, I put roofs over heads. I thought that if I gave Preston a sturdy house, he would become a sturdy man. I was wrong. I taught my son how to build a house, but I forgot to teach him how to build a character. I gave him the things I never had, thinking it would make his life easier. But easy doesn't make good men. Hardship does work, does integrity does. I look at Leo, who is now trying to teach the dog to fetch the baseball. He is kind, he is gentle. Yesterday he found a bird with a broken wing and made me help him build a shoebox hospital for it. He has a good heart. This is my second chance. I failed with Preston because I tried to buy his love with comfort. I won't make that mistake with Leo. I will teach him how to use a hammer. I will teach him how to fix a leak. I will teach him that a man's word is his bond and that you never, ever try to steal what you didn't earn. I close the file folder and place my hand on it. The leather is warm from the sun. People talk about legacy, like it is money, like it is a name on a building. But legacy is not what you leave for people. It is what you leave in people. Preston is my failure. Leo is my redemption. I pick up the glass and toast the empty air. To the land, I whisper. Because at the end of the day, that is what saved me. Not the bricks, not the wood. It was the dirt, the ground beneath my feet. The thing that cannot be moved, cannot be stolen, and cannot be faked. Blood is important. It connects us. It binds us. But blood can turn toxic. Blood can betray you. The land doesn't betray you. The land holds you up. It gives you a place to stand when the world tries to knock you down. Leo looks up and sees me watching him. Grandpa watched this. He yells. He throws the ball high into the air and swings the bat with all his might. Crack. The ball sails over the fence, disappearing into the neighbor's yard. Home run, he screams, throwing his hands in the air. I smile. A real smile. One that reaches my eyes and settles in my soul. Home run, I agree. I watch him run a victory lap around the garden, his laughter rising into the Texas sky. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the grass. The house behind me is solid. The deed is in the safe. The wolves are gone. I finish my drink and set the glass down. I am Harlon Ford. I am 70 years old. I am a father who lost a son and a grandfather who found a purpose. And as the screen of my life fades to black on this chapter, I know one thing for sure. I am still the king of this castle. And this time, the gate is locked. I spent 40 years laying solid foundations for strangers. Yet I forgot to build the character of my own son. I mistook sheltering him for love, but in reality, it was a poison that bred weakness and greed. The bitterest lesson I learned at 70 wasn't how to protect my assets, but realizing that a true legacy isn't found in bricks or bank balances. It is found in integrity and self-respect. Do not just hand your children the keys to the kingdom. Teach them how to wield the sword to defend themselves and respect others. If my battle to reclaim my justice and dignity resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to draw a painful line with a family member just to protect yourself? I want to hear your story.